Welcome into the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the Five Reasons Sports Network. I'm Ethan Skolnick. Before we get to today's episode, do you know what you need to do to get through this football season in South Florida, which is about as awful as it can possibly get? You need to go to betdsi.com. That's betdsi.com. Type in the promo code 5101. That's FIVE 101. You will get a bonus when you get on there, so it makes it a little bit easier to bet if you screw up at first. And you can go on and bet against the Dolphins every single week. I decided not to do it in week 3, and I was like, that was a good decision. I was watching them actually be competitive against the Cowboys, and then they became the Dolphins again. So if you want to bet against the Dolphins every single week, this week coming up against the Chargers, they're a home dog. They're going to be a dog in just about every game this season, except maybe the Jets at home. And you can go on there and make all of your bets on the NBA as well. So get in there and get your futures bets. I believe the Heat right now are 43.5 on betdsi.com. So if you feel good about the Heat, as I do, as I've convinced Alf to be as well, go on to betdsi.com, get your futures bets in. You could do live betting as well. So go there, 5101. That's FIVE 101, betdsi.com. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back here with you, and we are doing part 4 of a 5-part series as we head up into training camp. The news came today. I knew this for a few days, but we were sort of sworn to secrecy. Jimmy Butler press conference is coming up on Friday at 1 o'clock at the arena. We'll have live coverage for you there and tape a podcast, do a 305 live, and everything else that we do. Write up a story for fivereasonsports.com. So Jimmy Butler, after traveling throughout Europe the entire summer, then he came back. Pat Riley was gone, so they decided to wait until right before Media Day. They didn't want to do it on Media Day, which is coming up next Monday, because that'll be a circus. So they're going to introduce him on Friday. They're actually introducing Meyers Leonard informally on Wednesday. So as you listen to this episode, I'm probably going to be at the arena writing that up and tweeting that from 5 Reasons Sports. So we've done 3 of these episodes already about the biggest issues coming into camp. The first 2, I was joined by Alphonse Sidney and Alex Toledo, who you hear a lot from this year. And we covered A, is Jimmy Butler a true number 1? And B, we also got into the point guard situation and who should be the point guard this season, Goran Dragic or Justise Winslow. Episode 3, we brought on Giancarlo Navas. We hope you enjoyed that. I didn't as much. No, I did, actually. Enjoy being on there with G, the host of Miami Heat Beat. And we got into who's the real number 2 on this team, and we picked 4 different guys and never really totally settled it. And now we're going to do 2 more episodes with another member of Miami Heat Beat, Christian Hernandez. Christian, thank you for joining us.
Of course. I'm always glad to be here.
Well, you sound it. So you changed before we go forward, because I don't think a lot of people know your real name. They know you by your handles. And you changed your handle. I mean, you're not verified, so you can get away with that. But you changed your handle from the Maple Rick to I Can Be Your Hero. And I just want to ask you, because I remember listening to the Heat Beat podcast on the night that Tyler Herro was drafted. And at the time, you were not a fan.
I love that you're bringing this up.
Right?
I literally was like, I was stunned silence on draft night because we were all because I think we were doing a live podcast that night, and we were so jacked up because Sekou Doumbouya had fallen, and I hope I said his name right, that he had fallen to the Heat slot, and we're all just like, just send in the pick, take it, and we're all celebrating, we're all getting ramped up because the 2-3 picks before that, like, who's the guy that Gianni likes, the guy because he sounds like he might be an anime character, he went to the Wizards, like, nobody was expecting that, like, and then all of a sudden, it's Tyler Herro, and obviously, like, I personally hadn't done a ton of research on Tyler Herro because I thought he was going to be more of like a, very late lottery, probably like end of the middle of the first round kind of guy. And so I didn't even bother like looking at him much. But now that I've seen a few workout videos and I've seen his entire general swagger, I've changed my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you lose a bet? Did you lose a bet? Because listening to that podcast that night, Alf and I were down at the arena, and I listened to it after you guys taped the next day. Or you taped that night at the time, but I listened to it the next day. Nekias Duncan threatened to quit.
I was not the loudest one about it.
No, it was actually Nikias, and now Nikias has written this really nice piece for 5 Reasons Sports a couple months during Summer League about what he brings offensively. I feel like all of you guys have turned on him in a positive way. Is it just swagger? Is it him dominating a bunch of 5'6" guys from China? Like, what is it, Christian, that turned you onto him after you were so turned off?
It's the short shorts.
I will say, now that I've followed him on Instagram for a few months, and that's kind of a lie too, because I don't really even use Instagram, but I've seen pictures on Twitter from Instagram, and I am a big fan of his general style. But in terms of his basketball, the biggest thing, honestly, right off the bat that he brings is a guy who can make a basket off the dribble. And that is something that the Heat have needed for, a while, at least someone who can do it relatively efficiently. So you got to hope he can bring that.
No doubt. The other voice you hear, of course, is Alphonse Sidney. You can follow him at Alf954. So here we're going to do 2 episodes with Christian. The first one, Tyler Herro plays into this because basically, I don't know if the Heat have enough shooting this year. And, the 2 issues we're going to cover here are shooting, and then we're going to cover rebounding. And we'll get to rebounding in the next step. But the shooting situation for the Heat, like I feel like you go to the big 3 teams and they had all of that shooting, right? You had Ray Allen, you had Mike Miller. James Jones couldn't even get on the floor. You had Shane Battier, you had Chris Bosh stepping out to 3, and all of these guys playing off LeBron and Dwayne. But recent years, the Heat have at times, with the exception of Wayne Ellington, struggled to shoot it consistently from deep. And I don't know if they necessarily are going to be able to do it that well this year. So before we get to some of the specifics of kind of, how Eric can make this easier on some of these guys, can you go through some of the numbers that you sent us, that we were taking a look at on this beautiful spreadsheet that we got today? And what would sort of concern you about the current roster, and who are the guys that need to step forward?
So, yeah, obviously shooting is a big problem because the Heat ranked in Synergy Sports, they were the 29th best offense or the second worst offense in the NBA last season. There was really nothing about their offense that stood out on other than spot-up shooting. So it's not like it's shooting across the board that's an issue. It's kind of situational shooting. They aren't a very good free throw. Let me rephrase. They're a terrible free throw shooting team. Mm-hmm. They are not a good team finishing around the basket, which is obviously another very important thing. It's difficult, and especially with the way that the league is trending towards, 3-pointers and towards, finishing around the rim. Those are 2 areas where it's kind of tough that you're not good at either one, and 3-point shooting, the Heat have never had a guy, at least not in the last few years, who has the skill and honestly the balls to just shoot up an uncontested or an unassisted 3. Just like just dribbling the ball up, just kind of like the kind of things that you see Damian Lillard doing, Steph Curry doing, James Harden doing, and that's another trend that we see in the league, and it's happening on successful teams. So you have to wonder, do you need somebody like that? Do you need somebody who isn't going to rely on running a perfectly executed pick and roll or running a series of screens to get loose? Sorry, I don't know if I went all over the place there.
No, you're fine. Well, I think part of the problem is last year, one of the only guys that was willing to do that was Dion Waiters, and he wasn't healthy. When the Heat went on their 30-11 run, you had Dion. You had a better, healthier, more aggressive James Johnson, and you had some of those guys. But I think we're underestimating how much the injuries to Dion and JJ hurt the team offensively last year, especially when it comes to Dion, because Dion was one of the few guys outside of Dwayne and Goran that was consistently creating his own shot the year before. Now, Justise and Josh Richardson came into their own a little bit, but we saw Josh's limitations, and Justise can create for others more than he can create for himself. So I'm excited, and I know you're not super high on Dion, but you're not like one of these Dion just haters. How do you feel about what Dion can bring to the table this year in full health?
I agree with what you just said. I think that he can be that guy, his first year in Miami, even though it was for a relatively limited stretch. But one of the things that I saw today when I was kind of, doing a little research preparing for this podcast was seeing the drop off in how often.
Wait a second. You do research before the podcast?
Oh God, are you kidding? I'm not going to just come on here and sound like an asshole.
Oh man. Ethan,
I guess I could do that. That probably would be more fun, right?
Yeah, that's like kind of my whole thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Christian, do you want to replace Alf?
No. I don't have the charisma that Alf does.
The way Ethan said that beautiful spreadsheet, I was like, oh my God, he misses Whittingham.
Well, I do a little bit sometimes, but that's okay. The two of you guys just used to argue about all this stuff. But, preparation is good sometimes, Alf. I like the off-the-cuff stuff, but like 3 minutes would be nice, maybe.
I'll do what I can. Christian, just send me spreadsheets every week.
I'm going to do my best. All
right, go ahead.
But the one thing I noticed with Dion is last season, he's historically every season he's getting 2 or 3 free throw attempts a game, which obviously is not a ton, but at the same time, he's never played like a huge volume of minutes anyway. But last season he averaged 1 free throw attempt a game in 44 games. He made 22 free throws in 1,100 minutes last season. If you really think about that, it's like he's avoiding contact. So that right away tells you that he was not right. And obviously, you try not to make too much of these workout videos, considering we've been watching Carmelo Anthony look like the greatest player ever for like 4 consecutive summers. But he looks noticeably different. And it's also interesting he's working out with Chris Paul.
No, that is interesting. But, look, you didn't even need to look at the numbers to kind of know that because, the last 3 games of the season, he was jacking up a 3 on every possession. Like, it was noticeable that he would not go to the basket. And that's a larger problem with this team. You mentioned the free throw shooting. It's not just that they're bad at it. And obviously adding Tyler Herro, and that's why he is a big part of this particular podcast, that if you take a look at what what they did in terms of free throw shooting last year, you hit on it. They were 29th in terms of attempts and makes, right? So it's not just that they're bad at it. They don't get there. And as Dwayne sort of declined, they didn't have anybody to get there on the team. And look, if you look at Dion, going down, David Rammel's story, which, in Forbes, said he went down to about 215 pounds. He was about 240 at one point. I think that will certainly help, but it's also, how they decide to rein him in. Because I'll ask you this question. When a guy's jacking up 11 threes and he's making 35% of them, which is about what Dion was doing at the end of last season, between 35 and 37%, which is a pretty healthy percentage. Is that a good thing for an offense or a bad thing? Because if you just look at it from a pure numbers standpoint, Christian, you would say it's a good thing, right? If you're making threes at a 37% clip and taking that high of volume, it's pretty good for an offense, right, in terms of true shooting percentage. But you're also not allowing anybody else to get anything else going. How would you view that?
I guess this isn't obviously the same kind of context, but, in the playoffs, Steph Curry is not as prolific of a shooter as he is during the regular season for obvious reasons, especially as you go deeper into the playoffs. I'm pretty sure in his finals career, he's shooting like the high 30s on very high volume. So do you ask yourself, does Steph Curry suddenly not become a great player? No, it's because of all the other things that Steph Curry does apart from his incredible shooting. That's what makes him an elite player. So Dion has to bring those other aspects. Last season, defensively, he was his first season here, he was very sharp defensively. And I was not prepared for that. And obviously he's been injured for the majority of the time ever since. So it's hard to really gauge what he can do on the defensive side of the ball. But he was super well-rounded that first season, and that's why the Heat really surprised people once he got healthy and back into the flow of things. I just hope he's committed, and I hope he also understands that his role is not guaranteed, and he's willing to fight for it and deal with any hiccups and speed bumps that come along the way.
I think what you're saying makes sense, and it's the thing I like Dion, right? And if you read my timeline, you'd probably call me a liar. But I think a healthy Dion is a really big asset to this team. I eventually think he's going to be a huge contributor off the bench because I think they're going to bring Tyler Herro in to start. Me and Ethan have talked about this after the All-Star break. At some point, I think Tyler Herro is going to be the starting shooting guard on this team. But what happens sometimes is I feel like Dion takes you out of the flow of the offense. And yeah, it's great that he can create his own shot, but the fact that a lot of times him creating his own shot comes at the detriment of the overall offense, and it comes as the first resort of the offense, where he's the initiator, and he's, instead of looking for somebody else, creating, getting into the offense, running something, he's just kind of blowing up the whole thing right from the beginning. So I think, and this is where, and Ethan made a good point either today or yesterday about what happens when Erik Spoelstra has a team with a clear alpha and a clear go-to guy. I think the fact that Jimmy Butler's on this team is going to rein in some of Dion Waiters' tendencies, if you will. And I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that, because not to say that Dwayne wasn't an alpha, but Dwayne was a declining alpha last year. On a court with Jimmy Butler, is Dion Waiters, do you think some of those tendencies will be reined in?
That's kind of why I was saying before that I hope that he accepts whatever role he ends up in, because, if you're looking forward thinking with the Heat, who are their top 3 players right now?
Well,
Jimmy.
Jimmy. This is the debate I had with Johnny, because I think there are really 4 options for 2 and 3. And I think it depends on what you're looking at for this year into the future. I think you can make a case that Goran Dragic and Dion Waiters could be their second and third leading scorers this year, in some order. And yet, for the franchise to really go anywhere, it ultimately needs to be Justise and Bam. But I very much think it could be those 2 guys, and I don't know necessarily that the Heat would hate that, because they might be able to flip one of those 2 guys if they want to before the trade deadline if they're playing at a high level. But I think this team always trends towards experience and veterans, and I think some of it depends on role for Goran. But I wouldn't be – if I was to say right now who's going to be the second leading scorer on this team, I think it's going to be Dragic. And my next choice would be Waiters.
You know what's funny, Ethan? I don't think the second leading scorer or the third leading scorer necessarily means the second or third best player on the team.
Oh, I agree with that, because I think the second or third best player on the team could be Bam and Justise in some order.
Yeah,
I think the second and third leading scorers are going to be, I think, if they're healthy, I think it's Goran and Dion.
I guess I have kind of a hot take. I think the second leading scorer is going to be Bam.
I think that's the best possible thing that could happen for the organization.
If that's what happens,
Now, why do you say that? Because Johnny and I had, if people should listen to that podcast I did with Navis, Johnny didn't agree with that at all.
Johnny is really low on Bam.
Well, no, Johnny is very low on Bam, so that's not surprising to hear.
Okay, but now the case I made to him about Bam, and we'll get back to sort of the long range shooting and all that in a second, but the case I made to him on Bam is that, other than Kelly and doing the dribble handoff stuff, and obviously you hope Kelly improves for 3 and getting in a more consistent role this year helps him do that. But other than that, everything they're going to run in terms of pick and roll and everything else is going to be with Bam. He's going to get all of these easy looks at the rim. He's a vertical player. I think, and Jimmy is a great pick and roll player and a very good passer in those situations. And so I just think that Bam's going to get a lot of cheapies before he even develops that kind of 10 to 13 foot face-up game that I think will make him really dynamic. Why do you think he'd be the second? That's the case I made for him. Why do you think he'll be the second leading scorer on the team?
Okay, so part of my rationale is that I'm kind of, and it's really, it's probably not a smart bet, just historically how the Heat have treated this subject, but I am making a bet that Jimmy Butler's presence is going to result in the Heat running more in transition. And I don't think there's anybody that's going to benefit more from that than Bam, who was already essentially the Heat's best transition player last season. And on top of what you said, he's shown that he's a capable shooter. In very, very small samples, he's shown that he can operate in one-on-one situations. And he's actually, last season on, 20 attempts, so it's a very small sample, but he shot 45% off the dribble. He has like a natural feel to shoot the ball. It's just he's never really been asked to do it. And then obviously he can also set a pick and set a devastating roll where he leaps over your head and destroys your soul and puts you on a poster. So there's a lot of different things that he can bring to the table. And I think having both Justise continuing to mature as a playmaker and a guy like Jimmy Butler who can essentially do it all offensively is really just going to open things up for him.
Okay, let's go back to like what this show was originally about. Which was, I get excited about the Dion Waiters stuff because I honestly really think he's going to have a good season. But going back to shooting, is Meyers Leonard? Because I know whenever we talk about shooting, we talk about Herro. I think we have to talk about Justise more because Justise was essentially their best 3-point shooter last year, and I think that's gone under the radar as far as percentage is concerned. But I think Justise is going to be big when it comes to the 3-point shooting prowess. But putting aside Herro, putting aside Goran, putting aside Justise, I think Meyers Leonard is a guy that people aren't looking at enough that could honestly give you a nice punch off the bench. And if he shot 3, 4, 5 threes a game and hit him at a 35, 40% clip, I think that can add a lot. What do you see from Meyers this year?
I mean, you're getting the exact opposite that you had in Hassan Whiteside. Like, especially as after I saw that trade and I really got a chance to dig in more into like who Meyers is as a player. He is literally the opposite of Hassan. He lives on the outside offensively. You know, he can operate inside, but that's not really where his strength is, obviously, especially if you can get 3 points on a shot instead of 2. Defensively, it's not pretty. I'm not gonna like dress it up for you. So you kind of have to hope that his ability to open things up for the rest of the offense, as well as hitting, 3-pointers at a high percentage, would bring enough value so that, any shortcomings he has defensively kind of get compensated for. But I think he's a good fit. I mean, I think Spo really misses having just kind of roster flexibility when it comes to, being able to run different things offensively and defensively. I don't think Meyers is really going to help defensively, but we're talking about shooting right now, and he's definitely going to help shooting.
So the one thing on Meyers that I noticed, though, is the attempts were so low in Portland. And part of that's a product of minutes, but even per minute. I mean, he didn't take a lot of threes when he seems to be able to hit them at a pretty high clip. Do you think, will we see a double there per minute, do you think? Because I would think that Eric gets a hold of him and sees the potential for him as a 3-point shooter and is basically going to tell him what he's told other guys, which is, empty the clip, basically. Would you anticipate that?
I mean, it's funny. We all just saw Brook Lopez play for Team USA, right? Do we think that he would have made Team USA if he didn't transform himself into this high-volume 3-point shooter?
Right. So, I mean, that's what I would anticipate. I think Meyers per minute is going to double the 3-point attempts, and I think Kelly's are going to go up too. I want to get to some of these specific guys, and Alf raised the Justise question, and we'll get to that right after the break. But I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. That is Magic City Casino. You've got to check out the High. That's JAI. If you've ever watched Highlight, it's a great, fast game. It's a Miami game. And they play it, and you can bet on it at Magic City Casino at the High. But what makes this different is it's also a nightclub. So go check it out on Friday and Saturday night. They've got full beer selection, full liquor selection. Alf and I have gone out there. It's a great time. Get to know some of the players that you're out there, bet on some of the matches, and also, of course, watch some games because they've got TVs there and back there and everything else. So go check out the High. It's Magic City Casino. It's right there in Miami. We're probably going to try to do an event there. If the Canes are compelling at all later this season, we're going to try to do something for a Hurricanes game out there on one of these Saturday nights. So go check out the High at Magic City Casino. All right, Alf mentioned Justise. And, it is crazy to think about this, but with Wayne Ellington gone last year, Justise became their best 3-point shooter, and he shot 38% again while doubling the volume from the previous year. A, do you think he can repeat that, Christian? B, do you think he can shoot at higher volume? And C, does it make any difference whether he's playing the point guard full-time or whether he's sliding over to maybe the 3 or even the 4 because Goran's logging a lot of those minutes?
Yeah, that's kind of something that I was thinking about while Alf was talking before. You're going to have guys like Jimmy, Goran, and Dion likely at different points on the court with Justise at the same time. Obviously, those guys are used to having the ball in their hands. And considering Justise was their best volume 3-point shooter last season, I believe it was him and Dion were like neck and neck. But considering that, you would think that he is probably going to be used off ball a fair amount, as a spacer, which is not a bad idea especially if it leads to open looks that he can drain. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Spo, balances that. I think this is going to be a really interesting year for Spo, especially considering how poor the offense was last season, because he has more tools at his disposal now. And it's going to be fun to see how he uses it, especially Justise, because Justise, I mean, they've admitted as much that they love the general utility that he brings.
Christian, and I feel like we're just interviewing you, but it's okay because I'm tired of talking to Ethan, and Ethan's tired of talking to me. And we've had these conversations with each other like over this entire summer. So I want to ask you, because Ethan and I have kind of come to the consensus that Waiters is probably going to be the starter. I think we both agree that the starting lineup will most likely be Winslow, Waiters, Jimmy, Olenek, and Bam. And I think that's a smart way to start the year. But because of the shooting, and because of Waiters' ability to basically create his own shot along with Goran, I think he's a better asset off the bench. We both think that Herro is going to be the starter by the All-Star break. Are you on that same wavelength? Do you think that he's going to start? Do you see from the beginning of the year? Do you not think he's going to see the starting lineup all year? What do you think happens with Herro this year?
I thought you were going to ask me about Dion. With Herro, I mean,
no more Dion talk. We've talked enough about Dion.
Yeah,
I go overboard with the Dion stuff.
I mean, obviously it would be a lot of fun just for my new general brand if Tyler were to become the new starting, shooting guard sooner than later. But at the same time, the Heat kind of historically have slowly incorporated, rookies and young players, I guess really with the exception of Justise, just because of how valuable he was defensively in his rookie season as they made that playoff run. And Josh too, obviously both of them. But yeah, obviously he's going to help, the second team. That second team is going to be pretty fun if you really look at it. You're going to have, so let's say the scenario that you were talking about plays out where you've got Justise, Dion, and Jimmy in the starting lineup. Then you've got what? You've got Goran leading the bench with Tyler Herro, Derek Jones Jr., Meyers Leonard, and I guess who would be playing the three in that lineup?
Well, James Johnson, right, would probably get
James Johnson. I'm sorry. Yeah. So that's actually you're really playing like Derek Jones as the three, which is a pretty big athletic lineup. You've got some spotted shooting, and you've got Goran running it. Goran could all of a sudden just out of nowhere put up 7-8 assists a game off the bench, if things break right for that bench.
I think Goran becomes a Sixth Man of the Year candidate if that's the case.
No, I think so too, and that's why I think that's where he belongs. And I also think it's very possible that they could start the season with Goran and Dion starting. I think that's possible. Although I think people would throw a conniption if Winslow's not the starter. I think it's going to.
There will be a revolt.
I think it's going to be one of the two of them. But getting back to Herro here, and then we want to hit Chris Paul before we go. Rookies historically, it's not just the Heat. Shooters. I did a big story on this about 3-4 years ago. Guys who come in the league with a shooting reputation typically don't do a hell of a lot that first year. They struggle to kind of find their spots, find their space in the offense, get off the kind of shots they did in college. I mean, even a guy like J.J. Redick, who became a really good player, did not have a really good rookie year. I mean, most guys who come in don't have great rookie years. Buddy Hield did not have a great rookie year. He struggled a lot at times his rookie year. Now he's kind of emerged over time. What have you found historically on that? Because we had David Thorpe on the pod, and he basically said, don't count on Tyler Herro at all this season. It's a redshirt year. And he likes him. But he just said rookies generally suck. Okay, and particularly rookies who come in and they're reliant. I know he can play off the dribble a little bit, which I appreciate. And I saw that up close. It's when I was in Vegas for Summer League. And he can do it in transition too, which I think is great. But it's not going to all come right away, and guys are going to make it hard on him. They're going to crowd him. What have you seen historically for rookies? Like, how much can fans actually expect him to help this year?
I mean, I was just looking up the best reference point that I could find, only because I compared Tyler to him in the middle of the summer because he was actually a better shooter in college off the dribble than he was than Stephen Curry, But Curry, his rookie season, was already shooting 43% from behind the arc. So there was no point in the NBA where Curry was really struggling to like make his impact felt. So obviously that's obviously the ceiling, and now we're trying to figure out where Tyler's going to fit from there. He's probably going to be like a feast or famine guy. They're probably going to give him some run end of the first quarter, maybe beginning of the second quarter for a while, see if he can hit a few shots, probably kind of the way that they treated Duncan Robinson at points last season. I tend to agree, though. It's tough. He's not going to be a plus defender. It's going to take him a while to get used to the speed of the game at the NBA level. I guess really the grind, because you're going to be dealing with these even larger men than what you're used to going up against. He's going to be getting hurt. It's very possible he's going to have to used to be getting dinged around a good amount. Those are a lot of the general reasons why I feel like young guys there's like an acclimation period. But hey, if he can come out and he's in 40% from three in his first month, you don't think they're going to give him more minutes?
Yeah, of course. And I'm hoping that's where it leads to a starting position. Just because I want to see the future of this team. And speaking of the future of this team, I guess we have to address this because it's been all over Twitter. The Heat Instagram accounts are going crazy because this is what they do. They just like photoshopping other players in Heat jerseys. So Chris Paul, the Chris Paul scuttlebutt is not going away. And there's reasons why it makes sense, right? Because if the Heat could get Chris Paul without giving up anything major, even maybe getting one or two of their first-round draft picks back, maybe you take – it's Chris Paul. It's not a flyer. And people are even talking about him declining that third year that balloons to $44 million. What do you think of the prospects of Chris Paul coming here? And what would that mean for the team? Because that blows up the whole point guard conversation, because most likely Gorham would have to go in that trade. That means Winslow is either starting next to CP3 or he's the point guard off the bench. So what does that do to the Heat, and do you even think it's a viable trade that's going to happen?
That's a heavy one, because you're either – You're basically, if you trade for Chris Paul, you have a window where, because here's my whole issue with the Chris Paul thing. That last year, he is not going to be a serviceable player. And that is a ton of money. Yep. And if you're trying to compete in this age, it is going to, like, if let's say that 2 years from now, that team gets all the way to the conference finals, but they're like right on the cusp. And all of a sudden, they've got – how many million is that final season? It's like 40?
44, I think.
40? It's $45 million, I think.
$45 million.
Christian, no, it's crazy. And this is why – look, I know there was a report today. Our producer, Alex Toledo, sent me this. There was a report today that, Sean Devaney posted. And he's a credible person, that he doesn't want to play for the Thunder, which makes sense. And that the Heat are asking for one pick back, and OKC might be more willing to throw in one of their other picks they received in trades, because they got that bounty of trades from the Clippers, which are going to be late first, right? The Clippers are going to be a top 4 team in the NBA. I don't see any reason you do this. I just don't. To me, you need to get two reasonably high picks to do this. You're crippling your franchise. And Alf and I are disagreed about Russell Westbrook, and I was pro making the move for Westbrook. This is a different conversation to me. Chris Paul was bad last year. Am I wrong about that, Christian? He was –
okay, I probably wouldn't go that far, but he definitely, when the decline started, right. For the 5 years before that, he's been relatively the same player. Sure, he's probably falling off a little defensively. Maybe his shot's not as sharp as it used to be. But last season, his field goal percentage fell by almost 5 points. His free throw percentage fell to the lowest, to the second, or actually no. Actually, he was not the best free throw shooter when he first came out, but obviously he eventually got to being like a 90% free throw shooter. He was 92% the season before last, dropped to 86. His assists were down, from his historic numbers. And again, he's going to be 34 this season.
He's 34 and he's going to be 37 at the end of it. That's the thing.
That's the problem.
Unless he's going to waive that option, That would be the only way I'd even look at it. And why would he waive that option? He's never going to get that money again. So it's not like at 37, the Heat are going to give him a 3-year deal like a going away present. I don't see it, man. I mean, they didn't give it to Dwayne. Like, I just don't see the point of this. And the other part of it that bothers me, and we're going to close because we got to get to another episode here, but the other part of it that bothers me is I don't want anything else impeding Justice's progress at that position unless they just don't believe in it, or unless he's going to be the guy flipped out there. I don't see the point of this, honestly, guys. I just don't. And I was pro Westbrook in terms of at least looking at that, but not this. I just don't see the point of it. All right, last thing for you here, Christian, in 30 seconds or less. The Heat will finish what in three-point shooting percentage this year in the league?
3-point shooting percentage, 20th.
Okay. Is that good enough for this offense to function? Because I think that's about where they're going to be too.
How good this team ends up being is going to be more about how good the defense ends up being, which I think can be really good.
I agree.
It's more about their offense being mediocre and not bad.
Yeah, I mean, Alpha's talked about if they can get to the top, like 10 to 15 in offense. I think if they get to 15 in offense, I think that's a positive. I think they're going to be top 5 defensively, and if they're top 5 defensively, and the next thing we're going to get to is rebounding. If they're not awful as a rebounding team, their defense is going to keep them in so many games that I think, again, they're going to win in the high 40s, but I don't think they're going to be great offensively. All right, make sure to follow these guys. You can follow him at I Can Be Your Hero. I never know how to pronounce it.
It's Hero.
Hero. I don't know what it is. And follow, I don't know. You totally flipped on him. You have no credibility. And Alf954. And, of course, Ethan J. Skolnick. We'll talk to you soon.